Commander Jake Morrison stood at the bridge viewport of the USS Horizon, watching the massive alien space station grow larger as they approached. The structure was unlike anything humanity had ever built, with crystalline spires that seemed to bend light around them and organic-looking sections that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. This was it, the moment humanity had dreamed of for centuries. First contact with an advanced galactic civilization. Distance to station, 2,000 kilometers in closing, reported Navigation Officer Tony Mitchell from his console. His voice carried the same mixture of excitement and nervousness that everyone on the bridge felt. After 3 months of faster-than-light travel, they were finally here. Dr. Lisa Hamilton adjusted her scientific instruments for the 100th time that morning. As the mission's lead xenobiologist, she would be responsible for documenting everything about the alien species they were about to meet. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked her recording equipment. "All sensors are active and recording," she announced to no one in particular. Captain Ryan Torres moved between the crew stations, his military training keeping him alert for any signs of danger. He had argued against sending Earth's first diplomatic mission with such a small crew, but the Galactic Council had insisted that large groups would be seen as threatening. "Remember everyone, we represent all of humanity today," he said quietly. Ambassador Claire Bennett stood near the captain's chair, reviewing her notes one final time. She had spent years preparing for this moment, studying every scrap of information the aliens had provided about galactic diplomatic protocols. The initial contact had been brief, just a simple message received by Earth's deep space monitoring station 6 months ago. The message had been in perfect English, which still puzzled the scientists back home. "Attention inhabitants of the third planet of star system Sol," the message had said. "You are invited to send representatives to the Galactic Council station at coordinates 847.3 by 291.7 by 102.9. Come alone. Bring no weapons. Prepare for classification review." The last part had confused everyone. Classification review of what? But the opportunity was too important to ignore. Humanity had selected their best people for this mission, and now they were minutes away from making history. "Incoming transmission from the station," announced Communications Officer Steve Parker. "They're requesting permission to guide us to Docking Bay 7. "Grant them permission," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. This was happening. After all the planning and preparation, they were actually here. The docking procedure was surprisingly smooth. The alien technology seemed to anticipate their ship's movements, gently guiding the USS Horizon into position with tractor beams that felt more like a gentle embrace than mechanical force. As the docking clamps engaged, Jake felt a moment of doubt. What if this was all a mistake? What if humanity wasn't ready for this? "Atmospheric readings from the station show a breathable environment," reported environmental specialist Danny Rodriguez. "Oxygen levels are actually lower than Earth. Normal, but within acceptable range for human survival. Life support systems are showing green across the board," added Chief Engineer Lisa Morgan from her station. "All systems nominal." Jake took a deep breath and looked around at his crew. These were Earth's finest, and they were about to step into the unknown. "All right, everyone, you know the drill. Stay calm, follow diplomatic protocols, and remember that every word and action will be recorded for history." The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Jake stepped through first, followed by Claire, Lisa, and Ryan. The docking bay was enormous, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch impossibly high above them. The walls were covered in patterns that shifted and changed as they watched, creating an almost hypnotic effect. But it was the aliens waiting to greet them that truly took their breath away. The first group looked like living crystals, tall and angular with bodies that seemed to be made of some kind of translucent material that caught and refracted the station's lighting. They moved with a fluid grace that was beautiful to watch, but Jake noticed they seemed to be staying unusually far away from the human delegation. The second group was more insectoid, with multiple arms and legs and large compound eyes that reflected the light in rainbow patterns. They were chittering to each other in what sounded like a rapid, clicking language. but their body language suggested nervousness or agitation. The third group was the most alien of all, resembling walking trees with bark-like skin and branch-like appendages that swayed even though there was no wind in the station. They seemed more composed than the others, but Jake could sense a tension in their movements. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," said the tallest of the crystal beings, its voice coming from a translation device that hung in the air between them. "I am Counselor Vexstar of the Zephyrian Collective. We are honored to meet you, though we confess surprise at your arrival." Claire stepped forward, following the diplomatic protocols they had practiced. "Thank you for inviting us, Counselor Vexstar. I am Ambassador Claire Bennett, and this is Commander Jake Morrison, Dr. Lisa Hamilton, and Captain Ryan Torres. We come in peace, seeking friendship and understanding between our peoples." Jake noticed that when Claire spoke, several of the insectoid aliens moved even further away. One of them was making rapid clicking sounds that the translator seemed unable to interpret. "Yes, peace," Vexstar replied, though there was something in its tone that Jake couldn't quite identify. "We must discuss your classification status. There are protocols that must be followed when dealing with representatives from Class X worlds." "Class X worlds?" Lisa asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic caution. "What does that mean?" The tree-like alien swayed more vigorously, and Jake heard what sounded like creaking wood. The translator picked up the sound and converted it to words. "Deathworld. Maximum classification. Survival impossible for civilized species." Jake and his team exchanged confused glances. There had to be some mistake. Earth was a beautiful world, full of life and beauty. How could it be classified as a death world? "I think there might be some confusion," Claire said diplomatically. "Earth is quite habitable. In fact, it supports billions of life forms." "Yes," Vexstar replied, and Jake could have sworn he heard sadness in the artificial voice. "That is what makes it so dangerous. But please, we must continue this discussion in a more secure location. Follow us to the survival zone." As they walked through the station's corridors, Jake noticed that every alien they passed stopped and stared at them with what he was beginning to recognize as fear. Some actually moved to the opposite side of the corridor, as if the humans were dangerous just by existing. The survival zone turned out to be a heavily shielded chamber with thick walls and what appeared to be multiple layers of protective barriers. The humans were directed to sit on one side of the room while the aliens remained on the other, separated by a transparent barrier that hummed with energy. "This is necessary for our protection," explained Hivemind Unit 7, one of the insectoid aliens. "We hope you understand." Jake was beginning to understand that they didn't understand anything at all. Whatever the aliens thought they knew about Earth and humanity, it was clearly very different from reality. But as he looked around at the fearful faces of the galactic representatives, he wondered if maybe the reality was more complex than any of them had imagined. The meeting was about to begin, and Jake had the feeling that everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the galaxy was about to change forever. The next morning brought an unexpected invitation that left the human crew both excited and puzzled. Counselor Vexstar had requested a cultural exchange meal, describing it as an important part of galactic diplomatic tradition. However, the location they specified was something called an ultra-secure bio-containment facility, which sounded more like a laboratory than a dining room. Jake Morrison gathered his team in the USS Horizon's briefing room to discuss the invitation. "I know it sounds strange, but we need to show good faith," he said, looking around at his crew. "Claire, what do you think from a diplomatic standpoint?" Ambassador Claire Bennett frowned as she read through the formal invitation on her tablet. "The language is very formal, almost like they're treating this as some kind of dangerous experiment, rather than a friendly meal," she said. "But refusing would probably be seen as an insult." Dr. Lisa Hamilton was already making notes about the opportunity to observe alien eating habits and social customs. From the scientific perspective, this could provide valuable insights into their biology and culture, she said. "We should definitely accept." Captain Ryan Torres remained skeptical. "A bio-containment facility? That doesn't sound like they're planning a normal dinner party, he said. What if this is some kind of test? Everything they've done so far has been some kind of test, Jake replied. But we came here to build relationships, so we'll go along with it. The biocontainment facility turned out to be even more elaborate than they had imagined. The humans were led through multiple airlocks and decontamination chambers before reaching the main dining area. The room itself was sterile and white, with separate sections for each species that were sealed off from each other by transparent barriers. Chef Maria Santos had volunteered to prepare a traditional Earth meal to share with their alien hosts. She had brought ingredients from the ship's stores, planning to make something simple but representative of human cuisine. As she began unpacking her supplies, she noticed the aliens watching her with what seemed like horrified fascination. I thought I'd make a nice salad to start, Maria said cheerfully, pulling out fresh lettuce, tomatoes, and cucumbers. Then maybe some grilled chicken with herbs and a side of rice? The moment she placed the vegetables on the preparation counter, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The insectoid aliens, led by HiveMind Unit 7, began making rapid clicking sounds that the translator couldn't seem to process fast enough. Emergency protocols activated, announced the facility's computer system. Biological hazard detected. Initiating containment procedures. Jake and his team looked around in confusion as additional barriers descended around Maria's preparation area. What's the problem? Jake asked through the communication system. It's just vegetables. Counselor Vexstar's crystalline form was pulsing with colors that the humans were beginning to recognize as signs of distress. Those organic compounds are highly reactive, Vexstar explained. The chemical signatures are consistent with industrial solvents and corrosive agents. Dr. Hamilton stepped forward, her scientific training taking over. I don't understand. These are common food items on Earth. Humans eat these every day. Impossible, said Ancient Rootkeeper, the tree-like Valdorian representative. Those compounds would dissolve organic tissue on contact. No living being could survive consuming such substances. Maria continued her food preparation, unaware of the growing panic among the alien observers. She began washing the vegetables in clean water, then started cutting them with a sharp knife. When she reached for the salt shaker, the reaction was immediate and extreme. HiveMind Unit 7 began violent convulsions, its multiple limbs thrashing as it fell to the ground. The other insectoid aliens rushed to help their colleague while making sounds that the translator finally identified as screams of terror. Sodium chloride, Dr. Hamilton said, suddenly understanding. You're reacting to table salt? That crystalline compound is used in our industrial processes to break down organic waste, Vexstar explained, its voice trembling through the translator. A single grain could cause cellular breakdown in most galactic species. The humans watched in amazement as the aliens treated Maria's simple food preparation like a chemical weapons demonstration. When she added pepper and other common spices, several more aliens required medical attention. Environmental specialist Danny Rodriguez had been quietly observing the proceedings, and now he stepped forward with a realization that would change everything. I think I understand what's happening, he said. It's not just the food, it's us. What do you mean? Claire asked. Danny pulled out his atmospheric scanner and began reading the current air composition in the facility. The air. We're breathing right now, he said. Can you tell me what the oxygen concentration is in this room? 12%, replied the facility's computer system. Reduced to minimum safe levels for the visiting delegation? Safe levels? Danny laughed, not realizing how the sound affected the aliens. Our ship maintains 21% oxygen. That's what we need to survive. The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien in the facility had stopped moving, stopped making sounds, stopped everything. They were staring at Danny as if he had just announced he was made of antimatter. 21%? Vexstar whispered. That concentration would cause immediate cellular combustion in Zephyrian physiology. We would literally burn from the inside out. Dr. Hamilton was quickly putting the pieces together. You're saying that the air we breathe naturally is poisonous. To you? Not poisonous, corrected Luminous Thought Crystal, another Zephyrian scientist. Highly corrosive. What you call oxygen is what we use to clean industrial equipment. It strips electrons from molecular bonds and causes rapid oxidation. Denny nodded slowly as the full implications hit him. So, when you classified Earth as a death world, you weren't talking about dangerous animals or natural disasters. You were talking about the basic atmospheric conditions that we need to survive. Precisely, Ancient Truthkeeper confirmed. Your world is saturated with compounds that would be lethal to most galactic species within minutes. The fact that life exists there at all is considered impossible by our scientists. Maria had finished preparing her salad and was now seasoning the chicken with herbs and spices. Each addition caused new waves of panic among the alien observers. I still don't understand the problem, she said. This is just normal food. Normal. For beings who evolved in a chemical environment that would destroy most known forms of life, Vexstar replied. You metabolize compounds that we classify as industrial waste. Your bodies process toxins that would kill us instantly. Jake was beginning to understand the scope of the situation. So when you look at us, you don't see explorers or diplomats. You see creatures that shouldn't be able to exist. That is correct. Hivemind Unit 7 had recovered enough to speak, though it remained at maximum distance from the human delegation. According to all known biological principles, your species represents an impossibility. You are living proof that our understanding of biochemistry is fundamentally flawed. The cultural exchange meal proceeded in a surreal atmosphere. The humans ate their normal food while the aliens watched through multiple layers of protective barriers, taking detailed readings of every bite. Maria's simple salad and grilled chicken were analyzed as if they were samples from an alien laboratory. As the meal concluded, Dr. Hamilton realized they had stumbled upon something far more significant than a simple diplomatic misunderstanding. The aliens weren't just afraid of humans, they were afraid of what humans represented. Earth wasn't just classified as a death world because it was dangerous. It was classified as impossible because life like theirs shouldn't exist there at all. The humans returned to their ship that evening with a new understanding of their place in the galaxy. They weren't just visitors from a distant world, they were living contradictions to everything the galactic community thought they knew about life itself. The request came the following morning during what the aliens called their daily assessment period. Counselor Vexstar had asked for a demonstration of human physical capabilities, explaining that the Galactic Council needed to understand the limitations of beings from such a hostile environment. The aliens seemed to expect that humans would be weak and fragile, barely able to survive outside their dangerous homeworld. Security Chief Ben Clark volunteered for the assessment, confident that he could represent humanity well. He had been a champion athlete before joining the space program, and his military training had kept him in excellent physical condition. How hard can it be? He asked Jake Morrison as they prepared to leave the ship. The testing facility was another sterile environment, but this one was filled with equipment that looked more like exercise machines than scientific instruments. The aliens had prepared what they called a standard physical evaluation suite, designed to measure the basic capabilities of galactic species. Dr. Lisa Hamilton accompanied Ben to document the proceedings, while Captain Ryan Torres remained alert for any signs of danger. The alien observers gathered behind their protective barriers, scientific instruments in hand, ready to record what they assumed would be a brief and carefully controlled demonstration. We will begin with basic strength assessment, announced Dr. Zixwala, a Corvan scientist whose insectoid form was equipped with multiple recording devices. Please lift the standard weight calibration unit. Ben approached the device, which looked like a simple barbell with crystalline weights attached. He grasped it with both hands and lifted it easily above his head. The alien's instruments immediately began making alarm sounds. Impossible reading, muttered Luminous Thought Crystal. The gravitational force required to lift that mass should exceed the structural limits of carbon-based tissue. Maybe your equipment is broken, Ben suggested, setting the weight down. Gently, that felt like about 50 pounds to me. The aliens conferred among themselves in rapid clicking and chirping sounds. They brought out additional weights, each one larger than the last. Ben continued lifting them without apparent effort, his face showing mild confusion at the aliens' growing excitement. "This unit weighs the equivalent of a small transportation vehicle," Dr. Zixwala explained as Ben hefted what appeared to be their heaviest weight. "No biological organism should be capable of manipulating such mass." "Transportation vehicle?" Ben laughed, a sound that made several aliens retreat further behind their barriers. "This is lighter than my workout routine back home." The cardiovascular testing proved even more disturbing to the alien observers. They placed Ben on what they called a movement simulation device, which looked like a treadmill designed for beings much smaller and slower than humans. "Please begin locomotion at a comfortable pace," instructed Ancient Rootkeeper. "We will monitor your biological responses." Ben started running at what he considered a light jog. Within minutes, the machine began making distressed sounds and sparks flew from its control panel. The aliens watched in horror as Ben's heart rate climbed to levels that their instruments registered as biological impossibility. "Subject's cardiac rhythm has exceeded fatal parameters," announced the medical monitoring system. "Immediate medical intervention required." "I feel fine," Ben called out, not even breathing hard. "Can we speed this up a little?" The treadmill exploded in a shower of sparks and smoke. Emergency systems activated throughout the facility as Ben stepped calmly off the destroyed machine, completely unharmed and barely winded. "Your cardiovascular system operates at pressure levels that would rupture our circulatory organs," Dr. Zixwala explained, her voice filled with awe and terror. "How do you survive such extreme internal forces?" Dr. Hamilton had been taking notes throughout the demonstration, but now she stepped forward to provide some context. "Ben, show them what happens when you get a small cut." Ben pulled out a small knife and made a tiny incision on his finger. The aliens immediately activated additional protective barriers and began making sounds that the translator identified as panic calls. "Biological breach detected," announced the facility's computer. "Emergency medical protocols activated." But instead of the catastrophic bleeding the aliens expected, Ben's blood immediately began to clot. The cut stopped bleeding within seconds, and the aliens watched in fascination as the healing process began almost immediately. "Your bodily fluids contain aggressive defensive mechanisms," observed Vexstar, its crystalline form pulsing with colors. The humans had learned indicated extreme stress. "The coagulation response is unlike anything in galactic medical literature." "It's just blood clotting," Ben explained, showing his finger to the recording devices. "Everyone can do this." Combat medic Kate Fisher had joined the group for the medical demonstration, and now she began explaining human immune systems to the increasingly horrified alien scientists. "The human body contains trillions of microorganisms," she said matter-of-factly. "Bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other life forms that work together to keep us healthy." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several aliens collapsing and requiring medical attention. "You are walking ecosystems," whispered Hivemind Unit 7. "Mobile biological warfare facilities containing organisms that would devastate our worlds." "They're not warfare," Kate protested. "They're helpful. They help us digest food, fight off infections, and maintain our health." "Infections?" Dr. Zixwala's voice rose to a pitch that hurt human ears. "You regularly battle microscopic invaders and survive?" "Well, most of the time," Kate said. "Sometimes we get sick, but usually our immune systems handle it." The concept of humans routinely fighting off diseases that would kill entire alien populations was too much for several of the observers. Emergency medical teams were called to treat what appeared to be multiple cases of shock. The final test was supposed to be a simple demonstration of human reflexes and coordination. Ben was asked to catch a small object that would be dropped from a moderate height. What the aliens didn't expect was the speed and precision of his response. The object, a crystalline sphere about the size of a baseball, was released from a height of 10 feet. Ben caught it effortlessly, his reflexes so fast that the alien recording equipment had trouble tracking his movements. Impossible reaction time, muttered Luminous Thought Crystal. Neural transmission speeds exceed theoretical maximums for biological systems. I used to play baseball, Ben explained, tossing the sphere gently back to the aliens. This is much easier than catching a fastball. The demonstration ended when Ben accidentally bumped into Dr. Zixwala while walking past. The contact was so gentle that Ben barely noticed it, but the alien's exoskeleton cracked audibly, and she fell to the ground with what sounded like several broken appendages. "I'm so sorry," Ben said, reaching down to help. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "Do not touch me," Dr. Zixwala gasped through her translator. "Your physical contact could be fatal." The medical team that arrived to treat the injured alien worked, with the same caution they would use around unstable explosives. They explained to the humans that Ben's gentle bump had delivered force, equivalent to being struck by a moving vehicle. As the session ended and the aliens retreated to their emergency medical facilities, Dr. Hamilton realized they had crossed another threshold in galactic understanding. The aliens no longer saw humans as impossible biological anomalies. They now saw them as walking weapons, beings so physically powerful that their mere presence posed an existential threat to other species. Jake Morrison's crew returned to their ship that evening to find an urgent message waiting for them. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session to discuss what they termed the human problem. The question was no longer whether humanity belonged in galactic civilization, but whether galactic civilization could survive humanity's presence. The psychological evaluation request came with warnings that made the human crew nervous. The aliens had prepared what they called a cognitive assessment protocol designed to understand how beings from a Deathworld processed information and made decisions. Dr. Amy Roberts, the mission psychologist, and communications officer Steve Parker volunteered for the evaluation, expecting routine intelligence tests. The testing facility was different from the previous ones, filled with soft lighting and calming sounds that the aliens believed would help reduce stress during the evaluation. Mind-tender Zalthek of the Scion Collective led the assessment team, its ethereal form floating behind multiple layers of protective barriers. "We will begin with basic problem-solving scenarios," Zalthek announced, its voice carrying an odd, harmonic quality that seemed to resonate inside the humans' minds. "Please observe the following situation and suggest a solution." The first test displayed a holographic scenario showing a damaged spacecraft drifting toward a star. The aliens expected the humans to suggest retreat or calling for help, the standard responses from all galactic species. Instead, Amy immediately began calculating trajectory adjustments and suggesting repair procedures. "The hull breach can be sealed using emergency patches," she said, pointing to specific areas of the hologram. "If we redirect power from non-essential systems, we can boost the engines enough to achieve escape velocity." The alien observers began making sounds that the translator identified as distress calls. Steve noticed their reaction and asked, "Is there something wrong with that solution?" "You are suggesting intentional approach to mortal danger," Zalthek replied, its form flickering with what appeared to be confusion. "Standard protocol requires immediate retreat to maximum safe distance." "But people might die if we retreat," Steve pointed out. "We have to try to save them." "Impossible behavioral pattern detected," announced the facility's monitoring system. "Subjects display suicidal determination toward problem resolution." The aliens presented increasingly complex scenarios, each one designed to test human decision-making under pressure. A burning building with people trapped inside, a sinking ship in rough seas, a medical emergency in a dangerous location. In every case, the human's first instinct was to help, regardless of personal risk. "Your species demonstrates what we classify as berserker adaptation," Dr. Quintal, a Valdorian psychologist, explained through the translation system. "When faced with adversity, your stress responses increase determination rather than triggering survival retreat." Amy was fascinated by the alien perspective. "You mean other species run away when things get dangerous?" "All rational species prioritize survival over abstract concepts," Zalthek replied. Self-preservation is the fundamental drive of all intelligent life. But what about helping others? Steve asked. What about doing the right thing? The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several aliens requesting medical attention for what their systems identified as psychological trauma. The evaluation took a darker turn when the aliens began testing human emotional responses. They showed recordings of natural disasters, conflicts, and tragic events, expecting normal biological retreat responses. Instead, Amy and Steve became more focused and determined as the scenarios became more challenging. Fascinating, muttered Dr. Quintal. Stress hormones are increasing, but instead of triggering flight responses, they appear to enhance cognitive function and physical readiness. It's called rising to the challenge, Amy explained. Humans often perform better under pressure. Define rising to the challenge, Zoltek requested. Steve thought for a moment. It means when things get tough, we get tougher. We don't give up, we fight harder. Fight harder, Zoltek repeated slowly. You choose to increase aggressive responses when survival probability decreases? Sometimes, Steve said. Especially when we're fighting for something important. The aliens began showing images of human military ceremonies, specifically focusing on monuments to fallen soldiers. They expected the humans to show signs of trauma or fear at the reminders of death. Instead, Amy and Steve displayed what the monitoring systems identified as reverence and pride. These individuals terminated their existence, Dr. Quintal observed. Why do you honor biological failure? They didn't fail, Amy said firmly. They sacrificed themselves for something greater than themselves. They died protecting others. Protecting non-genetic individuals, Zoltek added, its form pulsing with colors that indicated extreme confusion. They chose death for beings who share no biological connection. That's what makes them heroes, Steve replied. They put other people's lives before their own. The concept of voluntary self-sacrifice for non-relatives broke several aliens' understanding of evolutionary biology. Emergency psychological support teams were called to treat what appeared to be multiple cases of cognitive breakdown. Dr. Roberts decided to explain human concepts of honor, duty, and sacrifice, not realizing the impact her words would have. Throughout history, humans have willingly faced death for ideas like freedom, justice, and protecting the innocent, she said. We believe some things are worth dying for. Worth dying for, Zoltek whispered. Abstract concepts valued above biological continuation. Yes, Amy replied. A life without meaning isn't worth living. The psychological evaluation reached its crisis point when Steve casually mentioned human entertainment preferences. He described movies, books, and games that featured violence, horror, and apocalyptic scenarios, explaining that humans consume these as forms of recreation. You voluntarily expose yourselves to psychological trauma for pleasure? Dr. Quintal asked, its wooden form creaking with what sounded like disbelief. It's not trauma, Steve laughed, not noticing how his laughter affected the aliens. It's exciting. We like stories about heroes overcoming impossible odds. Impossible odds, Zoltek repeated. You find entertainment in scenarios where survival probability approaches zero? The lower the odds, the more exciting the story, Steve explained. We love underdog victories. Amy added to the explanation by describing human sports, focusing on activities like boxing, football, and extreme sports where injury was common and even expected. We enjoy watching people push themselves to their physical limits, she said. You celebrate voluntary participation in activities that cause bodily harm? Dr. Quintal's voice rose to frequencies that made the humans uncomfortable. It's not about the harm, Amy explained. It's about testing yourself, proving what you're capable of, overcoming fear. The aliens began showing signs of what their medical systems identified as complete psychological breakdown. The concept of humans actively seeking danger and difficulty for personal growth was incomprehensible to species that had evolved to avoid all unnecessary risk. The evaluation ended abruptly when Steve mentioned that humans often told stories about monsters and disasters to their children as bedtime entertainment. The idea that humans exposed their young to simulated trauma was too much for the alien psychologists to process. "Your species is psychologically impossible," Zolthek announced as emergency medical teams rushed to treat the traumatized alien observers. "You have evolved mental patterns that contradict the fundamental principles of survival psychology. We thrive on challenges that would cause complete psychological collapse in other species," Dr. Quintal added. "Your minds are adapted to find strength in adversity rather than seeking safety in retreat." As the humans returned to their ship, they left behind a group of alien psychologists who were struggling to understand how a species could evolve to find courage in the face of hopelessness. The psychological evaluation had revealed that humans were not just physically impossible, but mentally adapted to thrive in conditions that would drive other species insane. The Galactic Council now faced a new question. If humans were psychologically designed to overcome impossible odds, what would happen when they were introduced to the broader galaxy? The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from hundreds of species had gathered to discuss what they now called the human crisis. Some argued for immediate quarantine of Earth, others suggested fleeing to distant galaxies, and a few extremists even proposed military action to contain what they saw as an existential threat to galactic civilization. Commander Jake Morrison requested one final meeting with the Council, sensing that the situation had spiraled far beyond their original diplomatic mission. Ambassador Claire Bennett had spent the night preparing what she hoped would be a speech that could bridge the growing gap between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. The council chamber was massive, filled with representatives from species the humans had never seen before. The atmosphere was tense, with many aliens maintaining maximum distance from the human delegation. Some species had even attended virtually, too afraid to be in the same space as the humans. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Council," Claire began, her voice carrying across the chamber through the translation systems. "We came here seeking friendship and understanding, but it seems we have caused fear and confusion instead." "Fear is the appropriate response," declared Supreme Arbiter Kelvash, a massive being that resembled a crystalline mountain. "Your species represents a fundamental threat to the stability of galactic civilization." Navigation Officer Tony Mitchell stepped forward with a holographic display device, intending to show the Council images of Earth that would demonstrate humanity's peaceful intentions. "We want to show you our home," he said, activating the display. "We think there's been a misunderstanding." The hologram showed Earth's solar system in perfect detail, with the sun blazing brightly at the center and the planets orbiting in their eternal dance. The aliens' reaction was immediate and extreme. "Class G stellar furnace," gasped Counselor Vexstar, its crystalline form flickering with terror. "You evolved within the radiation zone of an active fusion reactor?" "That's just our sun," Tony explained, confused by the reaction. "It gives us light and warmth. Direct exposure to Class G radiation would sterilize most galactic worlds within hours," explained Dr. Zixwala, who had recovered enough from her earlier injuries to attend the session. "Your species thrives in an environment that would kill most life forms instantly." The hologram focused on Earth's moon, showing its massive size relative to the planet. The aliens began making sounds that the translators identified as prayers for protection. "That satellite is large enough to cause catastrophic tidal forces," observed Ancient Rootkeeper, its wooden form swaying with distress. "The gravitational disruption should make your planet uninhabitable." "The moon is beautiful," said Chief Engineer Lisa Morgan, genuinely puzzled. "It controls our tides and gives us light at night." "Tides," repeated Hivemind Unit 7, its voice filled with horror. "You live with regular gravitational fluctuations that would tear apart most planetary surfaces." The display continued, showing Earth's weather patterns in time-lapse. The aliens watched in stunned silence as massive hurricanes, tornadoes, and thunderstorms swept across the planet's surface. "Your atmospheric system generates energy discharges equivalent to nuclear weapons," Dr. Quintal observed, its voice barely audible through the translator. "How do you survive such regular bombardment?" "We call it weather," Lisa replied. "Sometimes it's dangerous, but mostly it's just part of life." The final image showed Earth's geological activity with earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and shifting continental plates. Several aliens required emergency medical attention as they watched the planet literally tear itself apart and rebuild continuously. "Your world is geologically active," whispered luminous thought crystal. "The surface constantly restructures itself through violent upheavals." "It's actually pretty stable most of the time," Tony said. "We've learned to live with it." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans lived on a world that was constantly trying to kill them, orbiting a star that should have sterilized all life, with a moon that should have torn the planet apart, in a system filled with planet-killing asteroids and comets, young ensign. Bobby Chun, the newest member of the crew, finally spoke up. "I don't understand," he said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "Why are you all so afraid of us?" The innocence in his question struck something in the assembled aliens. Here was a being who had grown up in what they considered the most hostile environment in the galaxy, and he genuinely couldn't understand why they were afraid. "Because you are impossible," Zoltek replied, its ethereal form pulsing with what the humans had learned was sadness. "Your species has evolved to thrive in conditions that would destroy entire civilizations." Dr. Lisa Hamilton had been listening to the exchanges with growing understanding. "You're not afraid of us," she said slowly. "You're afraid of what we represent." "Explain," requested Supreme Arbiter Calvash. "You've built a galactic civilization by avoiding danger, by finding safe worlds and creating controlled environments," Lisa continued. "But we evolved by facing danger, by adapting to it, by overcoming it." Ambassador Claire Bennett saw the opportunity and stepped forward. "What if we're not a threat to your civilization?" she asked. "What if we're exactly what your civilization needs?" "What do you mean?" asked Counselor Vextar. "You've classified thousands of worlds as uninhabitable death worlds," Claire explained. "Worlds with resources you can't access, with environments too dangerous for your species, but not too dangerous for us." The chamber began to buzz with excited conversation as the aliens considered the implications. "You're suggesting cooperation?" asked Dr. Zixwala. "We're suggesting partnership," Jake Morrison said, stepping forward. "Humans can go places you can't, survive conditions you can't, help you expand into regions of space you've written off as impossible. And what would humanity gain from such partnership?" asked Supreme Arbiter Calvash. "Knowledge," replied Dr. Hamilton. "Technology, understanding, the chance to learn from civilizations that have existed for millions of years." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some aliens remained fearful, but others began to see the potential benefits of having allies who could survive in impossible conditions. The concept of humans as galactic survival specialists rather than existential threats began to take hold. The final decision was reached when Ancient Rootkeeper spoke up. "Perhaps we have been looking at this backwards," it said. "We have seen Earth as a death world that somehow produced life. Perhaps we should see it as a forge that created the perfect survivors." The vote was close, but the Council agreed to establish what they called the Terran Survival Corps, a joint human-alien organization dedicated to exploring and colonizing worlds that had been deemed uninhabitable. Jake Morrison's final log entry reflected on the strange turns their diplomatic mission had taken. "We came to join galactic civilization," he wrote. "Instead, we discovered that our greatest weakness was actually our greatest strength. Earth didn't make us monsters, it made us survivors." The story ended with the first joint mission to a world that had been abandoned by the galaxy for centuries. The human crew worked alongside alien specialists, venturing into conditions that would have been certain death for any single species. Together, they began to transform what had been written off as impossible into a new world of possibility. Claire Bennett stood on the observation deck of the USS Horizon, watching human and alien crews working together on the surface of a world that sparkled with promise. The galaxy had stopped calling Earth a death world and had started calling it something else entirely, home to the guardians of impossible worlds.